Imagine waking up one morning, stepping outside, and discovering that your entire town, the place you've known your whole life, has vanished overnight. Streets are empty, houses are closed, and the laughter, chatter, and life that once filled the air are gone. There's no sign of struggle, no wreckage, no explanation. Just an eerie silence that seems to stretch on forever. This is not the opening of a nightmare. It's exactly what happened to the town of insert town name, a small settlement somewhere in Europe during the chaos of World War II. And even decades later, historians, locals, and investigators are still baffled by the events of that night. The town had been unremarkable, like countless others scattered across the countryside. Cobblestone streets lined with neat, modest houses. A single church whose bell told the hours. A small marketplace where merchants sold fruits, vegetables, and homemade goods. And children playing in the squares as adults went about their daily routines. Nothing about it hinted at the extraordinary fate that awaited it. Life in the town was simple but steady, even as the war raged across Europe. News of battles and bombings in far-off cities filtered through, but life carried on as if the world beyond the horizon belonged to someone else. Local residents reported that the evening before the town disappeared, everything seemed normal. Families dined together, shopkeepers closed their stores, and neighbors exchanged ordinary greetings. The sun set slowly over the hills, casting long shadows across the town, and a gentle wind rustled the trees. There were whispers of distant bombing raids, but nothing close enough to threaten them. Then, as night fell, something happened. Something that no one could have predicted. Eyewitnesses would later recall strange lights in the sky, flickering like lanterns, but moving in unnatural patterns. Some thought it was enemy aircraft passing overhead. Others believed it was just reflections of the moon on the clouds. But the most unsettling reports came from those who were awake in the early hours. A few residents swore they heard a low, humming vibration in the air, like the distant rumble of a massive engine or a storm far beyond the horizon. It wasn't loud, but it was impossible to ignore. Pets whimpered, dogs barked frantically, and even the bravest townsfolk felt a creeping sense of dread. By morning, the town was gone. Entire streets were empty. Buildings intact yet abandoned, and no one remained. The town's outskirts showed no signs of destruction, no craters, no scorched earth, nothing that would suggest conventional warfare. Families were simply missing. Gardens remained untouched, meals sat half-eaten on tables, and children's toys lay scattered on the streets, as if the owners had vanished mid-play. Livestock wandered aimlessly, confused and frightened, adding to the surreal scene. News of the disappearance spread quickly, though verifying it was difficult during wartime. Soldiers passing through reported the empty town, and nearby villages told tales of families that had simply ceased to exist. Rumors began to circulate, some calling it an enemy attack gone wrong, others claiming secret military experiments were involved. Theories ranged from bombings using experimental weapons to covert abductions, even suggestions of something supernatural. The fact that the town had not suffered visible damage made these claims seem almost credible. Decades later, historians piecing together records from the region found gaps that could not be explained. Census data showed the town's population vanished entirely in one day, without migration or deaths recorded elsewhere. Diaries and letters recovered from neighboring towns described the sudden disappearance, but all accounts conflicted in details, as though each witness saw something different, filtered through their own fears. Some mentioned glowing spheres hovering in the sky, others heard low humming and vibrations, and a few even claimed to see figures moving unnaturally through the streets before vanishing themselves. Military archives unearthed later suggested that the town had been near an area of strategic importance. Secret tests of new technology, perhaps experimental bombs or radar equipment, could have inadvertently caused the disappearance. Yet even with this explanation, nothing in the records fully accounted for the lack of debris or the intact condition of the buildings. It was as if the town had simply been lifted off the land, leaving only shadows behind. Locals who grew up in surrounding villages carried stories of the vanished town for the rest of their lives. Some spoke of eerie feelings when passing the empty space where the town once stood, describing sudden chills, the sensation of being watched, or faint echoes of footsteps that didn't exist. Others avoided the area entirely, unwilling to risk encountering whatever had claimed the town. Generations later, new settlers attempted to rebuild in the same location, only to abandon it after reporting strange phenomena. Lights in the sky, sudden gusts of wind, and the feeling of being pulled into an unseen presence. Archaeologists eventually visited the site, discovering that the foundations of the houses remained untouched, as if frozen in time. Personal items, a teacup, a book, a child's toy, were scattered exactly where they had been left decades earlier. Soil samples revealed no chemical traces of explosives or fire, and radiation levels were normal. In every measurable sense, the town had simply disappeared from the map, leaving behind an impossible mystery. Even the natural world seemed to respond strangely. Trees that once lined the streets showed unusual growth patterns, as though disturbed by a sudden force. Birds avoided the area for years, and some researchers reported hearing inexplicable sounds at night, like whispers or faint cries, though no one could determine their source. Satellite imagery taken decades later still revealed subtle anomalies in the land, faint outlines that seemed to echo the streets and buildings of the vanished town. The town's disappearance remains one of World War II's most chilling mysteries. Unlike bombed-out cities or villages erased by conventional warfare, there was no clear culprit. No enemy attack claimed responsibility, and no natural disaster matched the evidence or lack thereof. Investigators, historians, and conspiracy theorists continue to debate what really happened that night. Some propose secret military experiments gone horribly wrong. Others suggest phenomena beyond human comprehension. Even modern scientists admit that no known technology could have removed an entire town without leaving a trace. What makes this story even more haunting is that the people who vanished left behind more than just physical spaces. They left questions. Questions that challenge our understanding of reality, history, and human perception. Every account, every record, every scrap of evidence adds to the enigma, yet none solve it. The town that vanished in one night has become a symbol of the unknown horrors that linger in the shadows of history, a reminder that even in the most documented periods of human conflict, some mysteries refuse to be explained. And perhaps that is why the story endures. It taps into a primal fear, the fear of disappearing without warning, leaving nothing behind, of waking up one day and finding that your entire world, the people, the streets, the very air you breathe, has been stolen. By the time the first light of dawn broke over the hills, it became painfully clear that the town had disappeared. Not in the way a city falls to bombs or fire, leaving behind crumbled buildings and charred streets, but in a way that seemed impossible. The houses were standing, untouched, yet utterly vacant. Windows stared blankly, doors swung gently in the breeze, and the faint echo of life lingered in the air, as if it had been frozen mid-motion. Tables still held half-eaten breakfasts, and beds bore the warmth of occupants who had vanished without a trace. The ordinary rhythms of life had been violently interrupted, leaving nothing but silence. Those who lived nearby or traveled through the region in the early hours reported chilling accounts. A shepherd tending his flock at the edge of the town swore he saw figures in the streets, moving like shadows, yet not casting any reflection. The figures vanished as soon as he blinked, leaving him questioning his own senses. He described the sky as strangely illuminated by shifting lights, not like the sun rising, but like something alien and deliberate. The wind carried a low hum, almost mechanical in tone, vibrating in the ground beneath his feet. Even animals seemed unsettled. Dogs barked into the empty streets, cats hissed at invisible presences, and birds avoided the area entirely. Journalists and historians who attempted to document the event faced similar challenges. By the time investigators arrived, the town's emptiness was complete. No traces of human life were found, no footprints in the mud, no evidence of escape or evacuation, nothing that suggested a hurried departure. Yet the town itself was untouched. Roofs were intact, chimneys stood straight, and walls showed no sign of damage. It was as if some unseen hand had lifted every resident into the ether, leaving behind only the physical structures they had inhabited. Eyewitnesses gave accounts that were both contradictory and strangely consistent. Some described seeing luminous orbs hover above the town, moving in strange, hypnotic patterns, casting eerie shadows on the buildings. Others reported hearing the humming vibration, a low and persistent sound that resonated in their chests and made the hair on their arms stand on end. A few claimed to feel sudden waves of vertigo, a disorientation that made walking toward the town feel as though they were moving underwater. These experiences created a sense of collective terror, though no one could offer a rational explanation. Nearby villages became hubs of frantic activity as relatives, friends, and local officials attempted to piece together what had happened. Some brought search parties armed with shovels, ropes, and lanterns, hoping to find evidence or survivors. They combed every street and alley, peered into every house, and even dug shallow pits in the town square, convinced that perhaps something had been buried or collapsed underground. Each search yielded nothing. The town was a puzzle that refused to be solved, a perfect enigma cloaked in the ordinary trappings of daily life. Military officials quietly investigated, attempting to determine whether enemy action could have caused the disappearance. Secret tests, they considered, perhaps weapons or experimental devices capable of erasing entire settlements. Yet even their analysis produced no satisfactory explanation. No bombs had been dropped. No artillery struck the town. Soil samples and structural inspections revealed nothing abnormal. In the archives, reports hinted at clandestine operations nearby during the war, but nothing definitively linked to the town's vanishing. Even modern technology, decades later, could not replicate the phenomenon. It was as though reality itself had briefly bent, swallowing the town whole. Residents of surrounding areas told stories that painted a picture both surreal and terrifying. One woman recounted walking along the town's edge and feeling an invisible barrier pressing against her chest, preventing her from entering. She described the sensation as though the air itself had hardened, forming a protective shield over the vanished town. Another elderly man claimed to see shadows flicker in the empty windows at night, figures moving in the homes despite their emptiness. Some described hearing distant laughter or footsteps in streets where no one could possibly be walking. These accounts, passed down orally and later recorded, added layers to the mystery, blending fact and fear into a narrative that refused to settle into rational explanation. As word of the event spread, rumors began to emerge, some bordering on the unbelievable. Some locals suggested the town had been a target of secret military experiments, perhaps involving advanced technology unknown even to the scientists of the time. Others whispered of supernatural forces, an ancient curse or a punishment from beyond, triggered by something the townsfolk had done or stumbled upon. A handful of scholars and researchers visited the site over the years, only to report feelings of unease, vertigo, and inexplicable auditory hallucinations when near the town's remains. Even the most skeptical observers admitted a strange tension in the air, an invisible weight that made the area feel different from anywhere else in the region. Photographs taken in the days following the disappearance documented the eerie emptiness. Streets that should have been filled with life were eerily silent. Black and white images of houses showed windows reflecting light, but revealing no interiors. Furniture still arranged neatly, as though the occupants had stepped outside for a moment and never returned. Streets appeared deserted, save for stray animals wandering aimlessly. Each image was haunting, a frozen testimony to a night that had erased the town from human memory, while leaving its physical form almost untouched. The psychological impact on surrounding communities was profound. Survivors from nearby villages spoke of recurring nightmares in which they saw the town consumed by light, residents lifted into the sky, or entire streets swallowed by a void. Children refused to approach the area, convinced that stepping too close would make them vanish as well. Even decades later, the land remained largely uninhabited. Attempts to rebuild met with repeated failure, as settlers reported sudden disorientation, strange sounds, and a suffocating sense of presence that made the town impossible to repopulate. Modern investigators have returned with advanced equipment, drones, ground-penetrating radar, and atmospheric sensors. But the town continues to defy understanding. Soil analysis shows no traces of explosives or radiation. Structural scans indicate no hidden voids or underground mechanisms. Satellites detect only minor anomalies, faint traces of streets and building layouts buried beneath vegetation, as if the land itself remembers what once stood there. It is one of those rare events that blurs the line between history and legend, reality and imagination. The town's disappearance became a symbol of unresolved mystery, a haunting reminder that even in a century dominated by human knowledge, some events elude comprehension. Historians continue to debate its cause, conspiracy theorists speculate endlessly, and paranormal researchers treat it as a touchstone for phenomena beyond explanation. Years passed, but the mystery of the vanished town refused to fade. Scholars, historians, and the curious from across Europe began to arrive, drawn by tales that had morphed into legend. Each visitor approached cautiously, as if proximity alone might draw the town's eerie fate upon them. Yet the first thing they noticed was the silence. A heavy, oppressive quiet that seemed unnatural, pressing down on the shoulders of anyone who walked through the empty streets. Birds avoided the area, insects were sparse, and even the wind behaved strangely, moving in sudden gusts only to stop abruptly. The town was not merely empty. It seemed suspended in time, trapped between the living and the forgotten. Investigations began in earnest. Military records, long sealed, revealed that the town had been near a strategic testing ground during the war. Some suggested that the disappearance could be linked to experimental weaponry, devices so secret that even modern historians could only speculate. Yet all physical evidence contradicted such theories. Buildings were untouched, soil showed no trace of explosions, and radiation or chemical anomalies were absent. The most puzzling fact remained: no human footprints, no signs of evacuation, and not a single indication that the residents had fled. The town was gone, yet it was still there, perfectly preserved and impossibly empty. Eyewitnesses' accounts continued to fuel the mystery. Farmers who had been tending nearby fields described seeing lights in the sky, moving erratically but with purpose, illuminating the streets below in patterns that no natural phenomenon could explain. Some swore the lights had a hypnotic quality, as if drawing the town's inhabitants upward, while others reported a low hum resonating from the ground itself, vibrating through their bones and causing nausea. Children claimed to hear whispers, gentle and coaxing, calling them to follow into the empty streets. Though such stories were dismissed at first, the consistency across decades suggested something beyond imagination had occurred. Paranormal researchers joined the investigation, bringing with them devices meant to measure anomalies in electromagnetic fields and detect unusual energy patterns. Their instruments registered fluctuations the moment they entered the town's borders. Cameras malfunctioned inexplicably, compasses spun wildly, and radios emitted bursts of static that seemed almost like fragments of voices. Even skeptics admitted to a profound unease, describing sensations of being watched or feeling sudden chills that came without warning. The town had an energy all its own, an invisible presence that clung to the structures and streets like a shadow of the vanished lives. Some historians turned to records from neighboring towns, piecing together fragmented diaries, letters, and government reports. One document recounted the disappearance in detail, noting that residents in surrounding villages heard screams in the night, yet when they rushed to investigate, the streets were empty and silent. Another described sudden tremors in the earth, small but perceptible, coinciding with the reported humming and lights. Although these accounts were anecdotal, their number and consistency suggested a collective memory of an extraordinary event, one that had defied the laws of nature and human understanding. Speculation grew into theory. Some posited that the town had been caught in an early experimental test of teleportation or mass displacement technology, a concept far ahead of its time. Others argued for natural but rare phenomena, such as a microsingularity or a localized spatial anomaly. though even the most advanced physics struggled to support these ideas. Military experts considered secret wartime experiments, yet no documentation existed that could account for the town's perfect preservation despite the sudden removal of its inhabitants. Every plausible explanation seemed inadequate, and every attempt to recreate the event failed. Locals continued to contribute to the mystery in subtle but haunting ways. Stories passed down orally described sightings of people walking along the outskirts, looking confused, as if trying to return to a place that no longer existed. Some claimed that at night, faint silhouettes could be seen in the windows of the empty houses, fleeting shapes that disappeared when approached. Animals were especially affected. Livestock remained skittish near the town, dogs howled at invisible entities, and birds avoided the area entirely. Even decades later, settlers attempting to return to the town reported sudden bouts of dizziness, disorientation, and a profound sense of being observed by an unseen presence. For decades, the vanished town was a subject of obsession. Writers and documentarians chronicled the event, producing books, articles, and films that attempted to capture the eerie reality. Each account emphasized the impossibility of the phenomenon, the haunting stillness, and the unexplained disappearance of life. Researchers returned repeatedly, employing new technologies in hopes of finding answers, but the town resisted every attempt at understanding. Satellite imagery revealed faint outlines where streets and buildings once lay, as though the land itself remembered, yet provided no new evidence of what had occurred. The town became a symbol of unresolved questions and unanswerable mysteries. Unlike other locations scarred by war, there was no rubble, no destruction, no physical clue to mark what had happened. It was not erased through violence or abandonment, but through a phenomenon that defied comprehension. Generations grew up hearing the tale, passing it down as both warning and wonder, and the site remained largely avoided, a place where curiosity met with fear and logic collided with the impossible. Over time, paranormal and scientific theories blended into folklore. Some insisted that the town had been claimed by forces beyond human understanding, a place where the fabric of reality had been temporarily undone. Others argued for secret wartime experiments that had gone catastrophically wrong, though no evidence ever surfaced to support such claims. The stories took on lives of their own, merging first-hand accounts with speculation, dreamlike memories, and unexplained sensations, creating a narrative that was as mesmerizing as it was terrifying. Even in contemporary times, investigators report subtle but inexplicable phenomena. Electronic devices fail near the site, compasses spin without cause, and faint voices seem to echo through the empty streets. Witnesses describe sudden chills, pressure on their chests, and the sensation of being watched by something unseen. Attempts to rebuild have repeatedly failed, as settlers abandon the land after encountering these disturbances. The vanished town, though physically intact, remains inaccessible in a way that defies conventional reasoning. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the story is the persistence of memory. The vanished town lives not just in records or photographs, but in the collective consciousness of those who once knew it or lived nearby. Its presence lingers like a shadow, a reminder that even in a world governed by logic and science, events can occur that are impossible to explain. The town challenges assumptions, defies comprehension, and haunts the minds of anyone who dares to study it. The vanished town is not merely a historical curiosity. It is a reminder of the limits of human understanding. Years turned into decades, but the vanished town continued to fascinate and terrify. Scholars and enthusiasts alike traveled from far and wide, drawn by whispers of a place that had seemingly been erased overnight. Each visitor approached cautiously, as though proximity itself could trigger the same fate that had claimed the townsfolk. Yet what they found was not destruction, but an eerie preservation. Streets frozen in silence, houses standing intact, and belongings left behind as if the residents had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. The surrounding villages remained haunted by memory. Elderly residents recalled the day vividly, the morning when neighbors discovered the town's disappearance. Even after all those years, the descriptions of the empty streets, scattered belongings, and lingering sense of dread were remarkably consistent. People spoke of hearing faint footsteps in deserted houses or glimpsing shadows that seemed to move on their own. Animals avoided the area, sensing some intangible disturbance. A few daring children reported faint whispers, calling them to follow. But the curiosity was always met with fear and retreat. Investigators, both military and civilian, returned repeatedly over the years. The military suggested the possibility of experimental wartime technology, a device designed to displace entire populations, but there was no concrete evidence to support this theory. Soil samples revealed no contamination, radiation levels were normal, and the buildings bore no marks of explosive or chemical tampering. The town appeared physically untouched, yet its human element had vanished entirely. Every conventional explanation fell short, leaving experts to consider alternatives beyond the scope of contemporary science. Eyewitness accounts became more detailed as historians collected testimonies from descendants of those who had lived nearby. One villager remembered seeing strange, glowing orbs hovering above the town, casting unsettling shadows on the ground. The lights moved in intricate patterns, almost deliberate, as if orchestrated by an unseen hand. Another account described a low-frequency hum resonating through the earth, a vibration that unsettled both humans and animals alike. Some witnesses claimed that the air seemed heavier, pressing down on them with an invisible force, while others spoke of disorientation, vertigo, and the sensation that the town was shifting in ways that defied physical law. Attempts to rebuild the town were met with failure. Settlers reported sudden episodes of dizziness, nausea, and hallucinations when entering the area. Electronic devices malfunctioned, compasses spun without cause, and cameras captured strange anomalies that disappeared when reviewed. Locals who tried to farm the land or repair buildings abandoned their efforts, describing the place as cursed or alive with unseen eyes. Even decades after the event, the town exerted a psychological pull, a weight that made habitation impossible. Legends began to grow around the town. Some suggested supernatural forces were responsible, that the town had been claimed by entities beyond human understanding. Others posited highly classified wartime experiments gone wrong, perhaps involving teleportation, mass displacement, or other technologies not yet discovered. The story blurred the lines between reality and myth, with each retelling adding layers of intrigue and fear. People whispered about shadowy figures seen in windows, fleeting shapes darting along rooftops, and echoes of voices calling out from empty streets. The town's legend became a fixture in local folklore, a cautionary tale, and a source of fascination in equal measure. Researchers approached the site with ever more sophisticated tools. Ground-penetrating radar revealed faint outlines of streets and building foundations, almost as if the land itself remembered the vanished town. Atmospheric sensors detected subtle fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, although the significance of these readings remained unclear. Satellite images showed anomalies in vegetation and topography, hinting at hidden patterns, yet providing no definitive explanation. Even with modern technology, the town defied analysis, remaining as enigmatic as it had been in the immediate aftermath of its disappearance. Psychologists and sociologists also examined the phenomenon, noting the profound impact on the collective memory of the region. Villagers reported recurring nightmares, anxiety, and feelings of unease when discussing the town. Children who grew up hearing the story described vivid dreams in which the streets were full of people, only to vanish before their eyes. Researchers noted the persistence of these psychological effects across generations, suggesting that the town's absence had left a mark not only on the physical landscape, but also on human consciousness. The vanished town became a symbol of the limits of human understanding. It highlighted the fragility of life and the unpredictability of events beyond our control. Unlike towns destroyed by war, natural disaster, or human error, this town had disappeared without warning, leaving behind structures intact and no trace of struggle. Its sudden absence posed uncomfortable questions. Could entire communities vanish without explanation? What forces were capable of such acts? And, perhaps most unsettling, could something like this happen again? Even as decades passed, the town continued to resist interpretation. Writers, documentarians, and researchers returned repeatedly, attempting to capture its essence in photographs, films, and reports. Each attempt emphasized the eerie stillness, the frozen streets, and the unshakable feeling that the town existed in a space slightly removed from reality. Cameras often captured anomalies, strange lights, distorted shadows, or figures that disappeared upon closer inspection. Electronic devices malfunctioned, compasses spun, and even basic observations sometimes contradicted each other, reinforcing the notion that the town had become untethered from normal rules of space and time. The mystery persisted in public imagination as well. Novels, films, and documentaries depicted the town as a place caught between worlds, a site where history, memory, and the unexplained collided. Tourists visited, hoping for a glimpse of the vanished settlement, yet many reported unsettling experiences, voices in the wind, inexplicable chills, and the sensation of unseen presences. Even those who approached skeptically often left with lingering questions and a sense of unease that defied rational explanation. The vanished town story is not merely about a missing population. It is about the fragility of our perception, the uncertainty of the world we inhabit, and the presence of forces that elude explanation. It remains a haunting reminder that, despite our technological advancements and understanding of physics, there exist phenomena that challenge the very framework of reality. The town stands as a symbol of the unknown, a monument to mystery that refuses to be explained or forgotten. Ultimately, the town that vanished in one night has become more than an event. It has become a legend. Its empty streets, untouched buildings, and lingering psychological presence continue to captivate and terrify. Scholars, investigators, and everyday people are drawn to its story, compelled by the unresolved questions it poses. The town endures as a haunting testament to the limits of human understanding, a place where history, mystery, and imagination intersect. Decades passed, yet the vanished town continued to exert a peculiar pull on those who came near. Researchers, historians, and thrill-seekers alike were drawn to its empty streets, each hoping to glimpse some clue, some explanation, but each leaving with more questions than answers. The town remained physically intact, yet its very existence seemed suspended between reality and legend, a place where time had stopped, and normal rules no longer applied. Those who ventured too close often reported sensations that defied explanation. Electronic devices failed without reason, compasses spun wildly, and cameras recorded inexplicable anomalies. Some visitors experienced sudden waves of vertigo, as if the town were bending the very air around them. Others spoke of low-frequency hums that seemed to emanate from the ground itself, vibrations that resonated deep within the body. Animals, too, reacted unnaturally. Dogs barked into the empty streets, cats arched their backs in fear, and birds avoided the area entirely. Even decades later, the town exerted an influence that was almost tangible, a presence both invisible and undeniable. Local legends had grown alongside scientific interest. Elderly villagers recounted tales of lights hovering above the town, moving in strange, deliberate patterns, and figures glimpsed in windows that disappeared the moment they were observed. Children whispered about fleeting shapes that darted through streets, calling out to them in voices both familiar and alien. These stories, passed from generation to generation, became woven into the fabric of regional folklore. They painted the vanished town not only as a place of disappearance, but as a site where reality itself seemed to falter. Scholars and paranormal researchers returned repeatedly, documenting every anomaly. Ground-penetrating radar revealed faint outlines of streets and building foundations, as if the land itself remembered the vanished structures. Atmospheric sensors recorded unusual fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, though their significance remained unclear. Satellite imagery hinted at subtle distortions in the landscape, suggesting that the area retained traces of its former life, yet no evidence explained how an entire population could vanish without a trace. Even with modern technology, The town defied analysis, a reminder that some events lie beyond the reach of understanding. Psychologists studied the phenomenon as well, noting the profound impact on collective memory and perception. Villagers from surrounding areas reported recurring nightmares and anxiety, even decades after the event. Children who grew up hearing the story described vivid dreams in which the town appeared bustling and full of life, only to vanish in an instant. Researchers noted the persistence of these psychological effects across generations, suggesting that the town's disappearance had left a lasting imprint not only on the land, but on human consciousness itself. Attempts to repopulate or rebuild the town repeatedly failed. Settlers abandoned the area after experiencing dizziness, disorientation, and a profound sense of unease. They reported faint whispers and fleeting shadows, subtle but unnerving signs that the town was not as empty as it appeared. Crops failed, livestock became skittish, and electronic equipment malfunctioned. Every attempt to impose normal life upon the vanished town met resistance, as if some invisible force actively maintained the emptiness. The vanished town became more than a historical anomaly. It evolved into a symbol of human curiosity confronting the inexplicable. Writers, filmmakers, and journalists chronicled the story in books, documentaries, and articles, each attempting to capture the eerie stillness and psychological impact of the place. The town's fame grew not because of what happened during its existence, but because of the mystery surrounding its disappearance. Its legacy lay not in the lives it had held, but in the questions it left behind, questions that no one could answer, and that perhaps could never be answered. Some theorists proposed scientific explanations, experimental wartime technologies, localized spatial anomalies, or even early tests of mass displacement devices. Others considered the possibility of supernatural intervention, suggesting that the town had been claimed by forces beyond human understanding. Each theory attempted to rationalize what occurred, yet all fell short. No technology, past or present, could explain the complete disappearance of a town without leaving physical traces. No natural event could account for the perfect preservation of structures and belongings. The town remained an enigma, defying conventional logic. The human element added another layer of intrigue. The residents' disappearance left behind ordinary objects, frozen in time, teacups on tables, shoes scattered in doorways, toys in empty streets. It was as if life had been paused, then erased selectively. Personal items remained untouched, yet their owners were gone, creating a haunting tableau that blurred the line between history and memory. The town became a ghostly museum of lives interrupted, a silent witness to an event that challenged everything observers thought they knew about reality. Over time, the story of the vanished town became a touchstone for those fascinated by mysteries that straddle the line between fact and legend. Scholars debated, paranormal investigators explored, and locals remembered with reverent fear. Each visitor brought new theories, anecdotes, and observations, yet no one ever uncovered a definitive explanation. The town's mystery endured, amplified by decades of speculation, observation, and unanswerable questions. Even today, the vanished town continues to fascinate. Researchers return, eager to detect patterns in the anomalies, hoping to understand the forces at work. Tourists approach cautiously, drawn by the story's eerie allure and leaving with feelings of awe, fear, and fascination. The town, though physically untouched, exists in a state of liminal reality, a place caught between presence and absence, memory and myth, the known and the unknowable. Its story challenges assumptions, defies understanding, and persists as one of World War II's most haunting and enduring mysteries. Ultimately, the vanished town remains a testament to the fragility of human perception, the limits of knowledge, and the persistence of questions that refuse to be answered. It is a place where history and legend collide, a symbol of the unexplainable, and a reminder that some events are so extraordinary that they resist the passage of time. The town is gone, yet its presence endures in memory, in myth, and in the unshakable feeling that even in the modern world, there are mysteries that remain forever out of reach. And so, the vanished town waits in silence, a haunting echo of a single night that changed everything. A place where people vanished, yet the streets and buildings remain stubbornly intact, whispering their secrets to those brave enough to listen. It is a story that will endure, a mystery that refuses to die, and a reminder that even in a world dominated by human knowledge, there exist events beyond explanation, beyond understanding, and beyond time itself.